Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of the playoff preview on the OCL podcast that still has no name. I am JarlCarl alongside Llama. Regular season is over. Let's jump into these playoffs.
Yeah, here we go. Playoffs are already ready and roaring. It's kind of exciting. We've been watching these players for 9 weeks play some amazing games, and now they get to battle it off for a chance at the title.
Indeed, they do. We started with 10 teams. Niner Esports dropped out early on after some inappropriate behavior regarding accounts. Can't Smurf folks get knocked out, and Ban Out Bunny dropped out in that last week. So the 8 teams left all made playoffs, so it turned out the big playoff race didn't really shape up, but everybody made it in, and we're previewing this first week of playoffs. It's a little bit unclear when you have the first kind of 4 teams playing in for the playoff, but we'll go over how the regular season ended and then break down these upcoming matchups.
I think it kind of... Some things were unexpected, some things were kind of expected. I think it was actually a really good regular season. I think overall, like, everybody was pushing, was improving, and I think, even going through playoffs, we're going to see some excitement.
I agree. I think throughout, we had Elysium Shield pretty clearly was the top team the entire season, but outside of that, it wasn't super obvious where anybody else was going to land. We had Elysium Valor going up and down, the bad guys going up and down, teams really fighting for position, so an enjoyable regular season, and I think that'll make the playoffs even more fun since any of these teams could make a deep run.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I kind of think back to week 1, that when I was casting that first game, still interviewing the CEO of Elysium, saying, Elysium, we're going to try and get 2 teams in the finals, and, we talk about it every week after week. It was looking more likely, and it still definitely is.
Yeah, it certainly is. They march on. They've all made the playoffs, so they're, a couple of successful results away from getting that Elysium matchup in the finals. We also should shout ourselves out a little bit. We had Elysium Shield as the #1 team, if you take out Niner Esports, in our preseason power rankings, so at least we got one thing right, Llama.
Yeah, and we did get it right, but also, like, they proved it. Like, we were thinking, okay, I think they actually lost first week, correct me if I'm wrong, to Niner Esports, but, like, because they got eliminated after that, like, they didn't lose at all. Like, they were losing first games, but they weren't losing series. They were looking really good, and, like, they look so good overall as a team. They proved us right.
Yeah, they absolutely did. We had the OE teams pretty high up as well. We had, we had some missteps, but we don't need to talk about those too much. Sometimes you just get things a little bit wrong, but that's okay. Overall, I think we did a great job. It's been fun to kind of watch the teams move up and down, and I think we ended up with our power rankings reasonably close to where they ended up in the regular season. Llama, if you want to jump into where these teams actually finished in the standings.
Yeah, so I'm going to go 1 through 4 first, because I kind of want to talk about kind of how they shaped out. But Elysium Shield ended first, like we talked about, really, really good overall. OE Nova second, OE Infinity third, and Bad Guys fourth. Now, Carl, I kind of got to ask you, is there anything that surprises you about this top 4, the placement of this top 4, or other than Elysium Shield, which we kind of knew was they performed really well?
Absolutely. I'm a little bit surprised, I think, overall, that the bad guys bad guys is top 4 and that Elysium Valor isn't. I think we had a long time in this season that we had the 2 Elysium teams and the 2 OE teams were sort of running the table. They were clearly the best teams, and then that turned out to just not quite be how the cookie crumbled at the end. It was green stocks all the way for the bad guys. So I think for me, that's like the big surprise overall in this season, is that the bad guys really were able to dig themselves out of that cellar, move up, and take a position in the top 4 in the playoffs.
Yeah, they definitely surprised everybody. They were on like a end of the season crazy run, right? They were winning a lot. They were, like you said, every single week we were talking so good about them. But I feel like personally, if the season went on for maybe 2 or 3 more weeks, they could have broken top 2 for sure. Like,
yeah, I mean, we make the joke about the green stocks, but they were just winning and winning and winning and winning, and playing really, really well. They were able to beat Elysium Valor, which sort of secured them this spot in, I believe that was week 8, but I had a lot of faith in Valor. We were really hyping them up, right? Like, they're going to make their climb. They're going to make their climb. And it turned out it was actually bad guys that made the really big climb up through the standings. So excited to see how they do in the playoffs, because it seems like this team is only getting better.
Yeah, they seem like they're getting better. I think the one that also surprised me was kind of OE Infinity. I think both of us were kind of expecting them to end up top 2 and even maybe contest
Yep.
Elysium Shield. But I mean, if we remember, they had some issues like week 7, week 8 with Robin that they had to sub in somebody else. And Robin is such a like massive part of their team, right? Leading the team at that AD carry role. So I think that that little trip up did put them out of the top 2, but I still think they're going to have a pretty good performance.
Yeah, I think both OE teams are pretty scary as a playoff contender. They've both shown that they're very strong. Obviously, Nova, looking to be a little bit stronger, but I don't think either of these teams is somebody that you should take lightly, and they're in the 2-3 spot, I think, in a justifiable way. So a scary set of top teams to play if you're lower down looking to make a run.
Yeah. And I guess talking about those lower teams, we can talk about the placement of those bottom 4. At 5th place, Elysium Valor. 6th place, Divine Temple. 7th place, Dynasty Chaos Emerald. And 8th place, Always Slept on. Carl, again, I'm going to ask you, any surprises here? You kind of mentioned Elysium Valor. Tell me about them.
Yeah, I think the 5th spot is probably a reasonable place for this team. They struggled early on. They were able to win some more games, move up the table, and weren't quite able to break into the top echelon. And so ending up right around the middle, I think, makes sense for these teams. I think for me, the 6th through 8th spot, I don't have a ton of surprises about which team is exactly in which spot. I think this is roughly where the bottom of the table has been for the last couple of weeks. Maybe there's a division between 5 and 6 going down. We'll find out once we actually get into the playoff games themselves. But I think these teams, right around where they've performed, nobody here that I'm like, oh my god, I thought they were going to be top 2 just 2 weeks ago and they crashed. I think this is roughly in line with my expectations.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think the bottom of the table was kind of, more of a shakeup, more of a race than the top of the table near the end of the season. But honestly, I think Valor's scary. Like as a 5th seed, like you open the closet door, they're outside and inside, and they're one of the cleanest teams. That although yes, they had some issues early, like if they win, like they're like steamrolling. It seems like.
Yeah, you don't want to get in the way of that express train if they get out of the station with some momentum. Definitely could look for an upset, and we've already had a couple of games already that we'll get to later. So some of these teams have already started to show their playoff form.
Yeah, and obviously kind of a reminder that Elysium Shield, OE Nova will get those buys, so they did start up with that extra game. They Elysium Shield actually, it's LCS style, so we'll talk about this a little bit later, but Elysium Shield actually got to choose which side they wanted to play on, which will be kind of interesting when we get to see who they picked.
Yes, indeed. Right, so that's a little foreshadowing for you astute listeners out there, but Shield and Nova move on to the second round of the upper bracket, and then Dynasty Chaos Emerald and Always Slept On will start in the lower bracket, and then they will meet the loser of the 3-6 matchup, which is OE Infinity and Divine Temple, and the bad guys and Elysium Valor being the other one, and then we'll go forward with the double elimination from there. Llama, what do you say? You want to jump into the matches?
Yeah, I think I'm ready to go. We had, again, this is week 2. We weren't able to catch up before week 1, but the week 1 playoff matches, the first one we had was Elysium Valor and the bad guys.
Yes, indeed it was. This was the 4-5 matchup. Going forward with the first round, the seeds sort of line up that way. And we just talked about how we thought these teams maybe were going to be opposite earlier on. And Valor takes the 3-1 over the bad guys, potentially proving our surprise at having the bad guys in the 4th spot. A 3-1 match, reasonably convincing win, at least on the scoreline.
Yeah, I mean, kind of towards the end of the season, we were saying, yes, the bad guys, the stocks are green, they're going up, but we kept saying volatility, that this team, they have their explosive games, they have their explosive players, but Valor is just not a team to step into those traps. We talked about how clean they are, how many series they had on 2-0, and that's exactly what it seemed like they came into this series thinking, that if we don't allow them to have those explosive plays, they're going to have nothing to work towards.
Yeah, they have been a team that we just talked about the momentum, the express train. You don't want to get in their way, and they just play a lot of champions. They play a lot of different stuff in general, and they become very hard to ban out. It's hard to draft around, especially in a best-of-5 series. If you just have another pick every game, boom, we're going to play this. Playing 3 different 80 carries, I think, over the course of the series, just doing really, really well in that regard. Mid lane also with a wide champion pool, so just hard to draft against, I think, and that can be important going into a long series.
Yeah, it's really tough. They just have such a wide champion pool, and we've constantly talked about Chaser too, just like on AD carry, been able to not only have that wide champion pool, but play Ashe, which is just such a huge thing, can provide engage for your team, and if you are a really good Ashe, that's just another thing they have to ban away that opens up more things for your team.
Yeah, of course. And Ashe, in competitive play especially, is just one of the strongest AD carries if you can land those arrows. If you have the communication with the team to say, hey, I'm arrowing mid, boom, that should just be a pretty free kill if you're able to get that stun. Bot lane set up a gank. It just adds a lot of opportunity, a lot of pick potential for your team. And Chaser really, really strong on that champion. I think that's a key pick going forward that, in my mind, almost needs to be banned.
Yeah, 100%. I think definitely has to be banned. I think bad guys, they showed some good things, right? They were trying to show some of that, explosive nature, put Zakra on some of those, carry potentials. But I got another question for you, Carl, that, they're the 4 seed. We talked about them, everything going green. Do you think they actually underperformed in this matchup? That, going into it, yes, they're going to the lower bracket, but now they only have one more life in this tournament.
They do only have one more life. I think they did underperform a little bit. And I think a lot of that came through the bot lane. Not doing super well. And we've talked about the bot lane a lot, kind of getting run over. We just talked about it on the other side. I think you need to step up that performance just a little bit. I think it has to be an underperformance, right? You get defeated as the 4 seed by the 5 seed. You only take one game. But I don't think it means that the bad guys is by any means out of contention. Sure, they only have one more life. They should have an easier matchup now down in the lower bracket to be able to continue their sort of second life run. So I think it is an underperformance, but I don't think, given the team's history, that it's necessarily a death sentence for them. I think we will certainly see them again in later rounds. I think it obviously is a lot harder to win the league once you start in the lower bracket, essentially, but I don't think it's a complete death sentence for them.
Yeah, I don't think it's over, but I think they just need to be careful. Like, some of those, like, lower matchups, too. Like, if you get caught up, like, Zucker, we talked about them. Like, that carry jungle role is so good, because that's what they played around all season long. The Kindred game was absolutely amazing, but, like, you can't trust one player to get it done for all the games, right? Like, if you're going to start losing, if things start to happen and, that player becomes a weak point, all of a sudden, then your series just collapses. And you have to be careful because you're going down into a place where everybody only has one life, where everybody is going to be fighting and clawing for every single play they can.
And every game you play from here on out is an elimination series, which just adds that extra little bit of pressure for you. It becomes more difficult. You don't get any more buys. You're constantly back against the wall. So excited to see the bad guys step up and continue forward. I think they will go back to the green stocks, but for now, it looks like they had a bad day in the market, and they get pushed down to the lower bracket where they will play Always Slept On going forward in this upcoming week.
They'll play Always Slept On. Valor plays OE Nova next week, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Should be a good, fun matchup, but I think we should move on to the second matchup that did happen off in the playoffs. It was OE Infinity. They played Divine Temple.
Yes, indeed. This was the 3-6 matchup and a little bit less contentious, I think. OE Nova also able to take a 3-1 victory, so the same scoreline as the previous match. I think this, relatively speaking, is the expected result in this 3-6 matchup. Divine Temple just not quite as strong we thought going into it, and OE Infinity pretty much proving that. Robin with a good series on AD carry as OE Infinity takes care of business.
Yeah, I mean, OE Infinity, they obviously have Robin, who has been, really good, obviously, in the league. We talked about a power point for the team that, when they had those Robin issues, they looked like they were in a little bit of trouble. But when Robin gets Kai'Sa, it is just so impossible to play the game. They only got it for 2 games, but they won both those games, and then you only need to win one more. I'm actually surprised, Carl. I hate to say it, but I'm surprised Divine Temple even took a game off them.
I am a little bit surprised as well, honestly, at that. I think this was, you maybe say, a fluke. Static getting 15 kills in the bot lane up against Robin. They pulled out the Vayne Thresh, not, maybe the greatest lane in the world. So I think, you hope to chalk it up to a fluke if you are the side of OE Infinity, but you definitely want to make sure that you're not losing the grasp of it too much. 15 kills Zion on the other team pretty much spells doom. That champion just turns into a turret, essentially, at some point. But I'm a little bit surprised that Divine Temple took a game, but I think in a best of 5, losing one game is not completely the end of the world.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world, but I also think OE Infinity, they did their homework. They were prepared, I think, for this exact scenario that, maybe they weren't expecting to lose that one game, but they knew there's 2 power points on the map. It's their AD carry and it's their mid. Those are the 2 that we have to target, and the 2 champions that they have won on all season long is Xayah and Veigar, okay? And they banned them after they won one time on them. So, like, after they don't have those, like, they just can't win, right?
Yeah, pretty much, right? I mean, that I think goes part of the way to winning that one game, and it's something that in a long series like this, especially if the other team isn't, super prepared, you don't have a ton of history where it's obvious to figure out what you need to ban. Going forward, you can win one game playing, your great pocket pick, your one team composition that you're great at, but if you smash the other team, they're just going to ban you out, and suddenly you have nothing left. So winning the one game, yeah, you're closer to winning the series, but if everything gets banned afterward, you're pretty much back to the drawing board. So I think that is a risk for Divine Temple. They've sort of showed that now, too. In this series, the only time they showed any life is on these two champs, so they're going to have to cook something up going forward in the lower bracket.
Cook something up. I think they could have a chance, but I also think, like, OE Infinity is also just one of those hard teams to play. That the higher you get up on the leaderboard, it's those teams that have more places to press you. Where we talked about Divine Temple, they have a really good AD carry, they have a really good mid, but it's like, okay, so what about top lane? That island is just falling into the water, right? And then your jungle like is getting out gapped, and then that can create plays all around the map. So it's just really so tough.
Yeah, it is. If you are playing against a team that can win any lane, it becomes just so much harder, right? Because where do you focus? You can't. You just have to play a straight-up game and not focus on anything really and say, hey, we're just going to beat you. It turns out if they're a better team than you, that can be quite hard to do. So OE Infinity, I think, very versatile, strong in many positions. A pretty strong 3 seed, I think. Very excited to see how their matchups go against the other top teams once they go forward in the playoffs.
Speaking of going forward in the playoffs, OE Infinity will play Elysium Shield this next week, and Divine Temple will play Dynasty Chaos Emerald. Obviously, we kind of mentioned it, that Elysium Shield, they got to pick their side selection. So it's just like LCS, where they get to pick, okay, do we want the 3-6 matchup, or do we want the 4-5 matchup? And do you think that they picked this OE Infinity side? OE Infinity looks very strong. Yep. Did they... were they just thinking that OE Infinity would lose, or were they more scared of maybe a bad guys, that volatility coming through? What do you think?
I think, personally, that they didn't want to play their sister team.
Okay.
I think, in my mind, that has to be the decision here. I think OE Infinity is very strong. I think, maybe not absurdly stronger than the teams below them, but stronger, I think, overall than the bad guys or Valor at this point. And so it's not a team that I would really want to be playing in the second week, in my first match in the playoffs, especially since it's been, I think, over a month since Elysium Shield played anybody above the 6th seed in these playoffs, since they had that run against the lower tier teams. So they haven't had a difficult match, at least in the league, in a long time. I think they're just trying to avoid the sister team. They want to have that winner's bracket final matchup against, be the Elysium battle that they talked about, and maybe follow that up with the grand final. So I think, in my mind, that has to be the decision making, because I don't see any real rational reason you would want to play against Infinity.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too, but let's just take theoretical for a second. If you're not a sister team, if you have this very strong and balanced Elysium Valor team, which you did kind of actually struggle against in the matchup against them, and a bad guys that's very volatile, where you're kind of seeing OE Infinity on the downturn, right? With Robin not there, point. They had some holes in the boat that were kind of water was leaking into. Maybe that's the thought process, but I can also see it might just be, it's as simple as, no, we don't want to play our friends.
Yeah, I think the analogy that jumps to mind is I don't know if it originally started with the swordsman, but the greatest swordsman in the world is not afraid of the second greatest swordsman. He's afraid of the guy that has no idea what he's doing, because you don't want to get caught off guard with some crazy stuff coming at you from the bad guys or Valor. I think OE Infinity is a much more stable entity out there to play against. Yes, it's another very strong team. They're going to pressure you in all the lanes. They have a lot of picks, but they're playing, in my mind, reasonably standard League of Legends. And if Shield wants to say, hey, we're just better, we're going to beat you, I think that's not at all a bad way to play. I think it's been quite a long time since these two teams played. I think Shield has to be the favorite a little bit, I think, but probably not a 3-0 sweep type of favorite. Infinity look like they're definitely up to putting up a fight.
Yeah, and they got to do their homework, right? Because OE Infinity, they're gonna come in prepared. Robin's got the stat sheet in their back pocket to know who to target and whatnot. And all of the drafts from OE Infinity have looked just really, really good throughout the season. So I really think you have to come in prepared. Maybe ban the Kai'Sa. Don't let Robin have that. But again, they are so versatile that maybe you ban the Kai'Sa, something else slips through.
That's our one piece of advice: ban the Kai'Sa. And you should be okay. I think, for me, I'm having a hard time thinking about Elysium Shield in this matchup just because they haven't played a serious series in a long time. Not that they're...
4 weeks,
yeah. Right. Not that their games don't mean anything when they're playing against, the likes of Ban Out Bunny or Always Slept On, but they're sort of just steamrolling these teams 2-0, and it doesn't really show a lot of kind of what they're thinking or what they're preparing. And so I'm excited to see what they come out with in this series. I'm sure they've been doing a lot of scrimmaging, practicing on the back, scrimmaging behind the scenes is how you say that, but... we'll find out. I think this should be a great match. Two teams that play in relatively similar fashion, so I think we'll get a straight-up brawl.
I definitely think so as well. We kind of already started talking about the upcoming Week 2 playoff matches, so I think we'll just kind of continue talking about Elysium Shield and OE Infinity for a little bit. I have one big question that has kind of been looming over the entire season for Elysium Shield, and that is, will the, like, early dropping of games affect them? Because we saw that a little bit early in the season where they would drop the first game and then steamroll the second 2 games. Like, that can be a game changer, right? If you lose that first game in a series, all of a sudden OE Infinity starts to pick up momentum. Is that going to be a problem?
It's a great point. It might. I think, if you end up dropping one game, I don't think it's a huge problem. I think if you drop the first game, you get a little tilted. You drop the third game, you drop a second game, sorry, that can be a problem, right? If you end up down 0-2 or 1-2, it's just hard to come back from that in a best-of-5 series. I think if they need to lose one game and then they get back up to speed and steamroll everybody, I think the best of 5 is really the time to do that instead of a best of 3 if you really just want to lose one game. But I think it's a risk, right? Especially since they haven't played in a long time, and they had the week off, so they literally haven't played in a while. That could be dangerous for them if they end up getting a little bit complacent, outdrafted the first game, start to doubt yourself, and I think that's when Infinity could pick up some pace and try to take that second game and really force them into a sticky situation.
Yeah, and I also hope they don't fall into imposter syndrome, because I think it also could be like Elysium Shield. They've been talking like they're the best team, right? But we talk about Niner Esports. We talk about how they beat them week 1 and how they're like kind of thinking in the back of their head, maybe we were the second best team. Maybe we didn't deserve this spot. I just really hope they don't like fall into that while they've had like 4 easy kind of off weeks.
Yeah, I think the mentality is underratedly important here for Shield. They haven't played a serious match in a long time. Sure, they've been scrimming, but you've got to get into that mindset. Go to the best of 5. Hey, this is a really good team. We deserve to be here. We're the top seed for a reason. Let's go beat them instead of, we're going to take care of business. It doesn't really matter too much. Oops, we're down 0-2. Guys, what happened?
I 100% agree, and I think it's gonna be a good one. I think it's gonna be one of the better series of the week. Because OE Infinity did get streamed last week, we are streaming the other match, so I think it'll still be exciting, but it'll be played off stream.
Off stream. Don't get to watch, but you can check the results in the match results page, and I was gonna say it's just as good. It's not just as good, but you can at least see who won, or you can tune into the podcast next week, and we'll tell you all about it. So there we go. Got to get the plug in for ourselves next week. Let's jump on to the second match of the week. This is the one that will be on stream. It's OE Nova against Elysium Valor.
Ooh, baby. This one's an exciting one, because I think we've talked about it, that Elysium Valor, they seem like a higher seed than they are. They're very stable of a team, but Nova's the same way. Like, I think this is going to be like a brawl, like everybody fighting in bot lane, everybody going at each other, and of course it's being streamed, so we get to watch it live.
I know, this is Friday at 9 Eastern, I think? 8 Eastern, just looked. 8 Eastern on Friday. Be there or miss out. We will of course recap this next week on the podcast as well, but it's more fun if you get to watch it in person on the live stream. So I think Nova, similar mental issues, I think, or mental concerns potentially to Shield. They just haven't, they had the bye week, so sometimes that can affect teams. Valor had to play last week. They had to get an upset. They're probably feeling good about themselves. So I think Valor comes in with a little bit of momentum, feeling like they can challenge a higher seed. But I think Nova, still a slight favorite for me. Not as much of a favorite as Shield is over Infinity, in my mind. But I think Valor, they have a lot of variants, so who knows what they're going to come out with.
Yeah, I think they do. I think Nova just I don't know. Nova's in kind of a weird spot for me, because I feel like we talked about Infinity a lot more. That Nova was always kind of sitting behind them, sitting in their shadow, and then the last couple weeks, those issues with Robin happened, and they jump up to this number 2 seed. So I definitely think, like you said, that they need to come out swinging. They need to prepare, and both these teams, although they're stable and slow playing teams, they need to play a little bit faster. They need to make some plays.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I think Nova, I just looked at the standings here. They had a bye week, reasonably close to the end. They played against Always Slept On, and then their last week's matchup was against Ban Out Bunny, who didn't play their game. They dropped out of the league. So Nova has played one match in the last 4 weeks in the league. So they also have not been playing matches really at all. And it's been 5 weeks since they played anybody but the 8th seed in these playoffs. So hopefully they've been scrimming off stream, but I think we just don't have a lot of data on either of our top 2 seeds right now, which is sort of interesting at the end of the season.
Yeah. I think that's kind of weird. I think both teams definitely have to do as much research as they can. Obviously, for Nova, I think the biggest thing for them is they have that another thing where like they have that big a champion pool where you're talking about Major who can play Kaisa or can play Zeri, which isn't super in meta, but you give it to someone that has the hands to work with it, can make some really good games out of it. So I think Valor, they got to come in and get their bands ready and be prepared. But like you said, not a lot of information. You got to work with what you have.
Yeah, we saw sort of the last time that they played against OE Infinity and they took the 2-0 in that Civil War. We were sort of surprised by that at the time. The Zeri for Major, very, very important. We also had a Darius power pick, I think, in that game that was really strong. Yeah. Sort of a random Darius, and I think the control mage Ziggs also taking down some towers. So some sort of weird picks that you were sort of touching on there, and I think that can be important in this kind of series. If you can pull out something like a Ziggs and get a win off of it, that can be very important, especially if you can do that multiple times, right? We talked about earlier just the Xayah-Veigar combo. If that's it, it's a one-and-done situation. If it's, boom, I'm playing Ziggs, win a game. Yeah. Boom, I got Darius, that's another game. Stuff like that, if you have that wide of a champion pool, it can go very far for you.
Yeah. They did. I was actually, funnily enough, watching the Dive podcast for the LCS, and they were kind of mentioning this, that they were talking about APA, who is specific, like Ziggs is their power pick, Ziggs is their one kind of one trick that they play, but APA is not super great in the actual meta champion. So like APA is very good on Ziggs and can win a game with Ziggs, but it's what you have to do is you have to get the enemy team to ban those, right? You obviously you win a game, they ban them, but you have to make sure you're good at meta things too, right? You can't just be good at Ziggs.
Right. If you play your pocket pick and then it turns out you can't play Azir, you can't play Corki, you can't play anything in the meta. Suddenly now you're playing another pocket pick that's probably not as good, and then that looks terrible because it isn't objectively very strong. So the champion pool, it's just so important in a best-of-5 series. If you're playing 4 or 5 games, you might have to have 4 or 5 picks that are ready and prepared to play at the level that your team needs, and not a lot of players have that. And I think that's part of what sets the top teams apart is they can just draft a lot more widely.
And I think draft will be exciting. I think not only the games will be exciting, but the draft will be exciting between these two teams. I'm real excited to see what they pull out. Obviously, I'll be casting that game, so that'll be an exciting one. I think I'm thinking with Nyarko that day, so that'll be fun.
Everybody come check out Llama, twitch.tv/Optimal Championship League. We get the plug-in. We'll say it again at the end, but we'll throw it in here. Should be a lot of fun. Let's move on to the lower bracket. And the first one we'll talk about, it's the 6-7 matchup, Divine Temple versus Dynasty Chaos Emerald.
Yep, starting our elimination matches here, one of these two teams is going to be knocked out. I think Divine Temple, Dynasty Chaos Emerald, they've been kind of bouncing back and forth. We talked about it that, the 6, 7, 8, they've been kind of rotating through. Divine Temple I think they had, if I remember correctly, that DQ win at the end of the season that kind of pushed them ahead of everybody else. But, they're still kind of in the running with everybody else.
Yeah, I think this is a very close matchup. I think there's not a lot. You asked me earlier how I felt about the two teams being here, in the bottom half, and I think I was like, well, they're all sort of not a lot of surprises. And I think now they're playing each other, I'm not really expecting a whole lot of surprises. I think either of these teams could take it. Maybe a slight edge for Divine Temple, given that they are coming down from the upper bracket, so they have already played a match more recently. They didn't have a week off. Like Dynasty Chaos Emerald, even though they started in the bottom section of the bracket, they did have the week off to prepare. I think Divine Temple maybe a little bit more fresh and ready to play, but for me this is a pretty close to a toss-up of a match. 6-7 seed, very close, a little bit shaky throughout the season. I think whoever shows up in better form is probably going to take the W.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Like you said, definitely closest in the seeding, probably closest, I think, in the overall match score. But I think we should move towards the final match to talk about. And I unfortunately don't think this one is going to be close.
No. I will break the suspense in case you really haven't not been paying attention. It's the bad guys against Always Slept On, the two teams left. The bad guys dropping down after their defeat against Elysium Valor. And I would have to agree with you, Llama. I don't think this game is going to be very close. No shade to Always Slept On, but I think the bad guys just looking stronger throughout the year. Always Slept On, they've been struggling.
Yeah, I think so. I just think we talk about mental, and I think that's a big piece that we've been talking about throughout today's episode is the bad guys, they can't fall into what we call the NRG effect, where, you know, you talk about them in the LCS, or they're really good against the top teams, and then all of a sudden they play down towards these lower teams, and they just lose all these matches for no reason. So, like, they have to make sure that, yes, you are favored, you're 4 seeds ahead of the other team, but you can't come in thinking, okay, we're just gonna 3-0, guys, we don't have to try. Like,
you don't want to get complacent. It's just, it's never a good way to do it. I think always slept on, you know, potentially on the flip side of that mental game, you know, have they checked out a little bit? Yes, you made playoffs, but, you know, it really hasn't been the league for them. It doesn't mean that they're bad players, of course. They're just not matching up well against the other teams that happen to be in this league. You know, are they more just, let's play this and get out of here, guys? We'll go, you know, continue to practice and whatever. Or are they saying, hey, we made the playoffs now. Let's do it. Let's try to win a match. I think it depends kind of where the mentals are for them as well. But I think the bad guys, as long as they try hard, they pay attention, they show up to play, I think they should win this matchup 3-1, probably at the worst.
Yeah, I think it will be kind of interesting, though, because we talk about it that the bad guys, although they're the 4 seed, they kind of lost early, right? So they now have to play through this lower bracket. They have to win every single matchup, and this is a good matchup to kind of, you know, get your morale back up to after that loss and continue on through. But you still have to be prepared at every single turn that you remember you're a volatile team and things can go bad.
Yes, indeed you are. Bad guys, you know, you got to win this match, but you've already lost, right? Are you tilted? There's a lot of mental aspects, I think, going into it, and in this kind of playoff bracket, it really does matter that you have the momentum, that you're staying sharp, that you're staying fresh. I think bad guys clearly the favorite, but they've got to take care of business.
I think so as well. That's all 4 of our matches for this next upcoming week. But, Carl, I got to ask, which one of these 4 matchups do you think is going to be the most exciting of any of them?
I'm going Nova versus Valor.
Okay.
I think that's my match to watch. I think the bad guys always slept on, in my mind, not super close. I'm excited to see Valor play against Nova. I think Shield Infinity is also going to be a great match, right? I mean, we're getting into the, you know, the top teams playing each other, so they're all going to be exciting. But Nova Valor, they're on stream, so that's very exciting. We're going to get to watch live. You're going to be there. I think Valor is just a very sort of random team. We've thought they're great. We've thought they're not so great. Who knows? I think Nova is, you know, a little bit weaker than Shield overall, and so I think Valor has a better chance against Nova than they would against Shield. And so I think this is probably going to be one of the closer matchups of the week that I think really could go either way. And I think it's the match that I would be the least confident in, like, picking a winner, because I think Elysium Valor definitely could win this series, even though they're the 5th seed, if they come out in the right gear. But it sort of just depends on which version of Valor shows up, and I think that'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, I think it will be too. I mean, we're talking about, like, matching up well. Like, both the teams are kind of mirrors of each other. They kind of play slow. They kind of play a little bit random, and then, you know, things happen here or there. But both teams have, you know, looked very stable towards the end of the season. So I definitely could see that. I think I'm gonna go with the 1-3 matchup just because, you know, Elysium Shield, OE Infinity is gonna be definitely a brawl.
I'm excited to recap that game. I'm sad we don't get to watch, but I'm very excited to see how that goes down, because I could imagine it going to 5 games. I could also imagine Shield just being like, yep, we're the best, 3-0, done. And I think either of those results are possible, so a little bit of variance there. Nova Valor, ton of variance, but at least we get to watch.
Yeah, I know Robin was telling me that Elysium Shield was kind of sad they didn't get to be on stream, but I think, like, if they win the matchup, they'll be on stream guaranteed.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it would be kind of sad because, like, Elysium, they're going to have to play Elysium Valor probably at some point, you think, right? Like, if Valor wins, they got to play each other if Shield wins. So it's exciting. Yep. And the other way, too. Like, OE, if they both win, they got to play. I
would be surprised if they don't play each other at some point. I think Valor is strong enough to, you know, maybe in the loser's bracket, maybe in the winner's bracket finals, sometime match up against the sister team again. And I hope it happens. I hope both of these teams get to play against their rival organization sibling, just because that would be so hype in the playoffs.
Yeah, that would be hype. What wouldn't be hype is if, like, Elysium Shield, Elysium Valor win, and then OE win both their matches, and OE, they have to eliminate one of their brother-sister teams in the lower bracket semis or something like that. That would be kind of sad.
That would be non-optimal. That's gonna, you got some bad feelings after that. After that one. With that being said, I am back from vacation. That's why we had no show last week. So we will have a show previewing week 3, which will be 2 elimination matches, since the winners of this week's upper bracket matches will have the week off. So there will just be a 2-match preview going forward for next week. And of course, we'll recap all the games that happened in this second week. Again, be sure to check out Llama as well as our other broadcast crew members on the stream at twitch.tv/Optimal Championship League for OE Nova versus Elysium Valor this upcoming Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's going to be a lot of fun. I will definitely try to be there as well. Say hi in the chat. Tell us you're from the podcast. That'll make us feel happy. We do love the fans. And if you have a name, I say this every time, nobody's ever suggested a name, but if you've got one, please suggest it, because we're taking suggestions for next season. So, got to have a name, Llama.
You gotta have a name. I mean, we've been thinking of the optimization, maybe something like that. I don't know. We need names. We need something, because it's just like the OCL podcast. That's not fun. We need something fun. So give us names.
Gotta get excited. While you're thinking about that, be sure to check out the stream as well. And again, thanks for listening to this episode. Good luck to all the teams in the playoffs, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.